Welcome back. We're talking about matters of health, especially as it relates to our skin. Keloids and vitiligo are two conditions that primarily affect African Americans. Dr. Peterson Pierre joins us now from Los Angeles to explain how we can best treat these types of ailments that affect our skin. Dr. Pierre, thanks for joining us. Explain to us what these things are, keloids and vitiligo.
Well, keloids are essentially an overgrowth of scar healing tissue. So anytime you get an injury, whether it's simple scrape, a cut, a burn, even an acne pimple or anything like that, the body's natural response is to heal. And so in that process, your body's producing extra collagen to heal up the wound. However, a keloid is an overgrowth of scar tissue. It's basically scar tissue that goes above and beyond what it's designed to do. And so the keloid typically ends up being significantly larger than the initial injury and can be extremely disfiguring. There are mostly people of color who are susceptible to keloids, but obviously anyone of any ethnicity can develop this particular problem.
Now, overall, is there a problem in treating the keloid? I mean, can you remove it, and then does it have the tendency to come back with more of a vengeance?
Yeah, that's a great question. The keloids in general can be very difficult to treat. The sooner, the better. So if you have something that's small, you can do simple interventions such as cortisone injections or different types of things that we can inject into the keloid to mitigate that excessive scar tissue. However, removing them, if they're particularly large, can be the best way to go. One of the things you want to keep in mind when you remove a keloid, it's another injury which can then stimulate that entire process all over again. So
Mm.
typically when I remove a keloid, depending on the location, we'll go ahead and also apply some pressure to that area, as well as topical cortisone or cortisone injections to prevent that whole process from starting over so that you can have a nice cosmetic result.
God, that sounds very good because it's a remedy that many people seek when they have this condition. What about the condition of
Absolutely.
vitiligo? We heard a lot about that type of rare ailment that affects the skin. We know that Michael Jackson had publicly come out and said that he was suffering from that as well.
Right. Well, vitiligo is also very debilitating, can be very disfiguring depending on what part of the body that it's occurring. So, vitiligo essentially what happens, there's some inflammation in the skin. And whenever there is inflammation in the skin, you can damage the pigment cells. Now,
Mm.
the pigment cells have a couple of different ways that they can respond to this inflammation. They can leak out more pigment, in which case you get a dark spot, or they can become so damaged that they stop producing pigment, in which case you get a white spot. Now, in someone who has very fair skin, it may not be that noticeable, but the darker your skin, the more noticeable it becomes. And it can affect any part of the body. Now, there are definitely some remedies, and like a lot of things in medicine, the sooner you address an issue, the better. The key behind treating vitiligo is starting early so you can attack the inflammatory process. Once you can calm down the inflammation, typically the body has a very good rate of response. The melanocytes, which are basically the cells that produce the pigment, get a chance to recover. And in a lot of cases, will produce the pigment back to normal without any residual scarring.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic to know. And Dr. Pierre, I have to ask you because you're one of the best in the business. So you're operating there in LA, but you are deemed as one of the best. How did you get involved in dermatology? What's your advice for those seeking to go into the medical field?
Well, it's interesting because I'm one of the very few fortunate people who knew at a very early age that I wanted to go into medicine. And it's interesting because I'm the first college grad in my family. I remember when I was about 7 years old, I was watching a soap opera with my mother. She used to love those. And I was watching All My Children, and there was this scene with a doctor who had just saved this young boy's life. And right then and there, I knew that's what I wanted to do. But growing up in a poor community, I never even knew that dermatology existed until I got to medical school. So during that time, I got exposed to dermatology. I found it very fascinating. The skin is easily accessible, it's a large organ, and there are a lot of variety of things that we can do. One moment I'm taking care of a skin cancer, next moment I'm helping someone with acne,
Yeah.
next moment someone has some excessive hair that I'm lasering, and different things like that. So there's a lot of variety, and I find that I can really transform people's self-confidence if I can address something that's been bothering them for a very long time.
All right. Well, Dr. Peterson Pierre, you've not only enlightened us and educated us and informed us, you've also inspired us, especially those who perhaps are seeking how to get into the medical field, and by following your example, they can do the same. So we thank you, and please come back on the show anytime. You are always a welcome guest here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I welcome any opportunity to be on the show again.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Peterson Pierre giving some tips on vitiligo as well as keloids, very important tips, as well as talking about his own personal life and seeking that medical degree. You can do the same thing, young people. Don't give up your dream. Back with more after this.